Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. 8 days after O. Selvam resigned as Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu and the Governor accepted his resignation, the state still does not have a new Chief Minister and Mr. Selvam continues in a caretaker capacity. The Governor, it's well known, is said to be waiting for the Supreme Court judgment in the disproportionate assets case, but 15 minutes ago it's been confirmed that the judgment will be delivered tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. So now, the key question is, was the wait justified or was the constitution undermined? And if Sasikala's acquittal is upheld, should she be sworn in immediately or should in fact the governor opt for what's called the composite floor test, whereby both contenders for the chief minister's job get an equal and fair chance to prove which has a majority? My guests are Sasikala supporter Apsara Reddy, Selvam supporter Durai Pandyan, the former editor-in-chief of the Hindu N. Ram, a former South India Bureau Chief T.S. Sudhir, and leading Supreme Court lawyer and Solicitor General Soli Sorabji. Gentlemen, now that we know for sure that the Supreme Court at 10:30 a.m. tomorrow will be delivering its judgment in that much-awaited disproportionate assets case, let's start tonight's program by examining the governor's behavior before we go on to the question what sort of floor test should be required if Sasikala is acquitted. First, the issue to do with the governor's behavior. Mr. Sorabji, now, is the 8-day wait justified by the fact that the verdict will be known tomorrow and we know that it's only been a wait of 8 days and not longer? That has been your original position. This morning, you were beginning to sound a little doubtful because you thought the wait may go on for too long. But now that we know it's ending, do you believe the governor was justified in waiting?
Well, Governor, I think you can't attribute lack of bona fides. He took a decision, and I think he took a correct decision. And now the Supreme Court judgment is there tomorrow morning. That will clarify a lot of things, Karan.
So in other words...
Because, look, let's be clear. Suppose the Supreme Court may I continue? Suppose it overturns the High Court judgment and holds Sasikala guilty of corruption. Correct? Then obviously she can't be sworn in as Chief Minister. But if she proves a majority on the floor by a floor test, some other person can be sworn in as Chief Minister. That's one thing I would like to emphasize. Question is, should she be sworn in as Chief Minister? No, if the Supreme Court overturns the High Court judgment. But another person can be sworn in as Chief Minister.
But my question is a little different. Mr. Sorabji, I'm interrupting you because my question was a little different. My question is, do you hold by your original opinion that the governor delaying the swearing in of Sasikala or taking a decision in the matter was justified? This morning, when there was no clarity when that judgment would come out, it sounded from your more recent interviews that you were having second thoughts. But now that it's clear that the judgment will be there tomorrow morning at 10:30, do you believe this 8-day wait was justified?
Yes, I do. I do.
What about you, Sanjay Hegde? Your position was the exact opposite of Mr. Sorabji's. You felt that it was constitutionally wrong and improper for the governor to delay, that in fact Sasikala should have been sworn in, and it didn't matter if after being sworn in she was then convicted and had to resign. Now that this 8-day wait is clearly ending tomorrow, do you, with hindsight, believe the wait was justified, or do you still hold by your position that the Constitution has been undermined?
I still hold my position that the Constitution was undermined, and I think a dangerous precedent has been set. Because the governor has chosen to examine suitability, the governor has indulged in speculation as to maybe somebody could be disqualified, could not be disqualified. Now please look at my own home state of Karnataka. Tomorrow let's assume that there is another government. The leader of the BJP out there is facing several cases. Could a governor sit on his hands and say, maybe judgment in that case is likely to come soon, I don't know which way it will go? No, please. That is not the way constitutions work themselves out. You have to work the constitutional machinery to its logical end. You do not, as governor, get to choose the suitability of a person. You have to just satisfy yourself that such and such a person is likely to command a majority in the assembly. And then if later that person suffers death, disqualification, bankruptcy, whatever, that person goes out. The governor does not have a pocket veto by sitting on his hands, even if it be for 8 days.
In which case, not only are you saying that the governor acted improperly and unconstitutionally, extending his powers beyond the remit of the constitution, but are you also worried that this governor could have set an unfortunate precedent that others may now sometime in the future choose to follow?
Yes, as a student of constitutional history, I'm keenly watching this. There was a kind of precedent way back in 2004, which has never officially come out, as to whether President Kalam did express some reservation about possibly swearing in Sonia Gandhi. Now we have this situation. We can't have our constitutional heads judge suitability. They are there to administer the constitution. They are there to be friend, philosopher and guide, but they are certainly no persons to judge whether what is going to happen in the future. Okay. If somebody comes in with cogent evidence of a majority, if I was a constitutional head, I would swear them in.
Now, there are, of course, Ram, other aspects of the governor's behavior that have also attracted attention, particularly in Tamil Nadu. For instance, on Sunday, the governor met Mr. Maitreyan, one of Mr. Paneer Selvam's top and closest supporters, but he did not even respond to a request from Sasikala for a meeting. Does that suggest a certain partiality, or at least lack of impartiality in the governor's behavior, to meet one side but not even to respond to a request for meeting from the other?
You're asking me, Karan?
I am indeed, Ram, yes.
Well, one instance...
Yes, I don't know the details, but I think that wasn't very material, because all the material is available in the form of written petitions to the governor. The only question is, what else could the governor have done? Is the governor obliged or not obliged to make reasonably sure that MLAs are free agents, that there is a free and fair flow test? I don't know how lawyers would look at that, but that's the only justification for the several days that have happened. But I don't believe delaying has given an opportunity for people to move from one flock to the other, because it's clear that those who go to Paneer Selvam are quite free agents, and those in the other camp, the majority of them, do not appear to be free, or even some of them are committed to Sasikala's cause. That's not perceptible.
Okay.
The way they have kept there. So I think the governor had a hard choice, and I'm interested in the nuanced difference between the former Attorney General of India, we just heard, and another senior lawyer whom we all respect. And Chidambaram also, let's remember, more or less concurred with Mr. Swaraj.
Let me put another aspect to you, Sudhir, of the governor's behavior that has evoked concern in Tamil Nadu. The first was the question I put to Ram, that the governor was willing to meet people from the Paneer Selvam side, but didn't even respond to a request for a meeting from Sasikala. The second is, it's known that Paneer Selvam needs 11 more MLAs to ensure Sasikala no longer has a majority in the assembly. By refusing to act for 8 days, didn't the governor end up giving Mr. Paneer Selvam time to get those 11 MLAs? And is that another sense in which the governor has been less than impartial?
Well, the governor would certainly be accused of having given a rather long rope to Paneer Selvam to establish, if not his majority, at least get as many MLAs to ensure that Sasikala does not have the over 117 mark, which is essential to form the government. And he may well have succeeded in that, because so far, though he has only 7 MLAs on his side, ironically he has more MPs than MLAs. But it's quite possible that many of those MLAs who are at the resort may feel disgruntled, may feel angry at the manner in which they have been treated over the last 5 days, and therefore decide to vote against Sasikala. That possibility always exists, and that's what Paneer Selvam would really be banking on. But arithmetically, Sasikala does still have the majority, at least has significantly more numbers than Paneer Selvam at this point in time. The governor would of course be accused of having behaved, or at least seeming to have behaved in such a manner which seems to indicate that he has favored Paneerselvam. But one small point, that Sasikala last night at around 10:30 did indicate that the governor had called 5 of them for a meeting, but by that time she had already left for the Golden Bay Resorts about 60 kilometers here from Chennai.
So that first question that I put to Endram of the governor choosing to meet one side and not the other is not actually valid, because the governor did offer to meet 5 from Sasikala's side, but by then she'd already gone to the resorts. Thank you for that correction, Sudhir. Apsara Reddy, tomorrow clearly is a big moment for Sasikala. It's quite possible that she will have her acquittal upheld, but it's equally possible that it may not be so. And in fact, if I recall a Hindu leader on Friday, the paper believes that it's more likely that she'll be convicted and found guilty rather than acquitted. So what's the mood in your camp this evening?
We're 100% confident that, like how Madam Jayalalitha and Sasikala Madam have been acquitted and have continued to perform their duties, Sasikala Madam will remain acquitted. This is an appeal against her acquittal and not conviction. So I'm 100% sure she will be the Chief Minister. We really hope the governor didn't delay this long and did the right thing by his chair. And also today's trends, I mean, you brought up the MPs defecting to OPS's side. We have to understand who is shooting from Mr. Paneerselvam's shoulder or the governor's shoulder. Who needs the MPs? Right now the MLAs are firmly behind Sasikala Madam, and that's what we require.
You know, Mr. Durai Panjan, if the acquittal is upheld tomorrow, it would be extremely bad news for Mr. Paneerselvam, because then not only will Sasikala have the vast majority of the AIA-DMK MLAs behind her, with a number that is clear enough to prove her majority on the floor of the House, but in addition, there will be no obstacle to her being immediately sworn in. Her claim will be virtually irrefutable. And at that point, Mr. Paneerselvam will be left with just a handful of 5 people.
If at all she is acquitted,
go ahead, Mr.
If at all she is acquitted from the DA case, Mr. Karan, if the 129 MLAs according to Sasikala, and you know, when the police officers went and calculated and came the swear and gave the affidavit, it was shown.
Oh, the line's broken. But the point Mr. Durai Panjan was making is that when the police gave the affidavit to the Madras High Court, it wasn't 129, it was 119 they had spoken to, and therefore 10 people have gone missing. That's the point Mr. Durai Panjan was making, and he was, I suppose, going to suggest that those 10 have come across to Mr. Paneerselvam's side, which means that he's got very close to that tantalizing figure of 11 that he needs to ensure that Sasikala doesn't have a majority. But the problem is, and let me put that question to you, Sudhir, even if that technical figure of 10 going missing is correct, have they actually come across to Mr. Paneerselvam's side, or are they just missing and no one knows where they are and who they support?
Well, at this point in time, if anyone is going away from the Sasikala camp, it would be obvious to assume that they would be crossing over to the Paneerselvam side. But of course, we have not seen any visible signs of them actually moving over. What is ironical in this entire episode, Karan, is that most people in the Paneerselvam camp would really be hoping that Sasikala gets convicted in the disproportionate assets case tomorrow. By extension, what it means also is that if Jayalalitha were to be alive today, even she would have been convicted, and she is the leader of both factions of the AIDMK. So that's really the irony of it, that while actually praying for Sasikala to be convicted, what they actually gloss over the fact is that their supreme leader Jayalalitha also would have probably got the same punishment if in case Sasikala indeed is convicted. But a little bit of news that I'm getting is that the 2 judges, PC Ghosh and Amitav Roy, Karan, if I may just put it this way, are quite likely to actually read out 2 separate judgments. So probably the legal luminaries on our panel could probably throw light on what this could actually mean. Are we looking at some kind of a split verdict if they're actually going to read out 2 separate verdicts in the DA case tomorrow?
That's very interesting, and I will definitely take it up with our luminaries. But at the moment, I've got Mr. Durai Panjan back. Mr. Durai Panjan, do you want to finish the point you were making? You were trying to suggest that there's a difference between Sasikala's claim of 129 MLAs and the police verifying by affidavit today that they only met 119.
Not only, Karan, one moment, 1 minute, Karan. No, not only that, you know, if MLAs are allowed to cast a vote secretly, there will be cross voting also. And not only that, our OPS was pleased to say today, I am in touch with 50 MLAs in the Bay. Things are going like that, which has not come to press.
Can I ask you, how has he been in touch with these 50 MLAs? How has he been in touch with these 50 MLAs? On the phone? Because their phones are switched off.
Yeah, right, you're right. I cannot say anything.
You cannot say anything. You want me to believe he's been in touch with 50 MLAs, but you can't tell me how?
Yes, yes. No, yes, that's what I'm coming to tell you. Say around 15 to 20 people went to the Bay, and in the resort, the persons whom they went, they gave their phone, and through that phone we contacted. And things all are going like that. Today they should not be put to sufferings. That is the reason I'm not able to say.
All right. I'll take that on board, and when I come to the question of what happens if Sasikala's acquittal is upheld, does she get sworn in, or do we have a composite floor test? I'll certainly bear in mind the point you make, because your argument that there could be cross-voting, and secondly your argument that 15, 20 or maybe 50 MLAs have somehow suggested they support Mr. Paneerselvam, are both arguments for suggesting a composite floor test may be better than actually asking Sasikala to form a government and take a floor test in her name. But I'll come to that later. First, I want to take up with both Soli Sorabji and then Sanjay Hegde this question that Sudhir has learnt, that the two judges in this case may give separate judgments. First, you, Soli Sorabji, if that turns out to be the case, that the two judges give separate judgments, does it mean that they've come to two different conclusions, and therefore the case will have to go to a third judge?
No, Karan, that's all speculation. They may give two separate judgments, or they may be concurring judgments. Maybe some part of the reasoning may be different, conclusion may be the same. That's all guesswork.
Yes,
the
but
very
just
fact
for
that there are
argument's
two
sake,
judgments,
of course it's guesswork, Soli Sorabji, and it's all speculation, but speculation is all we have to go on, and it's interesting for the audience. So let me just ask you to speculate with me. If they do end up with two judgments, one upholding the acquittal and one overturning the acquittal, what then happens? Just answer that for me as a former Attorney General.
Then we'll go to another judge.
And that
if that happens.
And that
but if they give two judgments, and if they are concurring in the conclusion, but let me complete, but different in the reasoning, it makes no difference. It's the judgment of the court.
But if there are different judgments that come to different conclusions, it goes to a third judge.
That could be so.
Let me bring you in on that, Sanjay Hegde.
Another thing, Karan.
Yes?
I just want to say one thing. Just 1 minute. Karan, 1 minute. I have great regard for my friend Sanjay Hegde. But he says suitability. It's not a question of government judging the suitability. Eligibility. If the person to be sworn as Chief Minister is not eligible to be sworn in because of Article 192, that's a different question. Not suitability. Government does not say, I don't think she has good diction, she's able, nothing of the kind. Question is of eligibility depending upon the judgment of the Supreme Court. Now that we have it, Sharon, don't you think we should begin tomorrow with you?
I'm not a lawyer, Soli Sorabji, but I will come in there and quarrel with you. The question of Sasikala's eligibility only arises on the assumption or presumption that the Supreme Court will strike down her acquittal. If you go by the opposite assumption that the Supreme Court will uphold her acquittal, she's perfectly eligible. So in trying to come to some conclusion about her eligibility, the governor is basing it on a presumption. The presumption that the acquittal won't be upheld. And that's an unfair thing to go by, because there's at least a 50% chance the acquittal will be upheld. That's the point I want to put. This is an unfair way of bringing up the issue of eligibility.
Karan, it's not presumption. It's not a question of presumption, it's a question of possibility.
Well, yes, but I mean...
he has taken that into account.
But...
There's a possibility, a live possibility.
But except that you bring up the possibility in such a way as to assume the outcome will be against her, and therefore on that basis you delay it till you know the outcome, and that may be unfair. Let me bring in Sanjay Hegde on this. Just for a moment, Sanjay, what do you make of the argument that I believe was in that document that everyone thought was the letter the governor had sent Delhi? It now transpires he claims he never sent such a letter, but there he said that article, I think it's 146, is not an article that enables someone who is not a member of the assembly to become a minister. It's a disabling one. In other words, if you can't get elected in 6 months, you cease to be a minister. And therefore, because it's a disabling rather than an enabling article, the government is a criteria or at least grounds for delaying any action. How do you respond to that argument?
Well, the governor has disowned it, and I quite think it was a draft written by somebody just out of law school, sitting in some policy think tank, and to whom probably somebody had outsourced this job of writing a draft opinion. I totally disagree.
Okay.
All that the governor has to check for is a person disqualified, and as you rightly pointed out, the disqualification kicks in only upon conviction. Before conviction, every person, man or woman, is entitled to a presumption of innocence. With that being the legal position, the governor taking into account a possibility, a probability that somebody may be convicted or may not be convicted, what's to prevent a governor tomorrow from checking out the possibility or probability that a man or woman may not be hit by lightning the next day if he or she is sworn in as chief minister? The governor has no business speculating.
Okay, let me stop you there and ask you a second question, Sanjay Hegde. Just for a moment, if it's correct that you end up with two judgments coming to different conclusions, one upholding the acquittal, the second overturning it, as Soli Sorabji says, it will have to go to a third judge. But how long does that process of going to a third judge take? Will the case have to be heard all over again for the third judge to form an opinion, or will the third judge go on the basis of the material that the first two judges had? Just explain that procedure for us.
Yes. No, it does not go to a third judge. It goes to a new bench of 3 judges. That's the difference. And because it will be a new bench of 3 judges, the case will have to be heard all over again. In the meanwhile, just because there is one judge who is found for a conviction, I am not sure that would be enough to disqualify. I would have to examine that position a little further. But there again, I don't want to be a speculative person. I'm not a governor anywhere.
But let me put this to you. If one judge upholds the acquittal and the other overturns it, you will have had 2 contradictory verdicts, which means that the Supreme Court bench has not come to a conclusion because the 2 judges can't agree. Therefore, the opinion of one judge
has not come,
and therefore the opinion of one judge
come to a final conviction,
which means the opinion of one judge convicting her can't become the final opinion, and therefore it can't become a disqualification. Presumably, in that event, the Karnataka High Court acquittal will continue till such time as a 3-judge bench sits, hears the case and overturns it. Is that right?
That would be the logical sequitur, yes.
Which means, Enram, that there's multiple possibilities that could emerge tomorrow. She could be convicted, she could be acquitted, but it's also possible, if the information Sudhir's got, and I repeat, it's only information, it's not verified, that in fact the Supreme Court bench will have failed to come to a conclusion.
I can confirm it. I can confirm it.
You can confirm it? Carry on, Sanjay Hegde. Carry on. What can you confirm?
Yes, the list for the Supreme Court. The list for the Supreme Court is out tomorrow, and it shows that 2 judgments will be delivered by the 2 judges.
Now, hang on a second. As someone who knows this, does that mean 2 concurring judgments based on different reasoning, in which case the 2 judges agree, or does it suggest that these are 2 judgments which come to different and opposite conclusions?
No, you can't read anything more. The only fact that we can confirm from our reading of the Supreme Court list is that both the judges will be delivering separate judgments.
All right.
As to whether they agree with each other or whether they disagree with each other, you can't make out from reading the list.
Ram, this means that as we wait for that judgment tomorrow, it's a night of enormous tension for the Sasikala side. She could be acquitted, she could be convicted, but it's also possible that the two judgments may come to opposite conclusions, in which case the Supreme Court bench hearing this case will not have come to a conclusion at all. And not only will the matter have to go to a new bench of 3 judges, which will take a fair amount of time to hear the case, but in the interim, the Karnataka High Court acquittal will continue to apply. There's a whole range of possibilities. Does that mean it's a night of enormous tension in Tamil Nadu?
Net, Karan, I think there'll be more anxiety than there would have been had only one judgment been listed, the cause list. And that's clear. In fact, Mohan Parasaran confirmed it earlier on your channel, that there are 2 judgments in this case. 2 judges have separate judgments. But I think it'll increase the anxiety because, they could concur on conviction, they could concur on acquittal, but it will increase rather than one judgment. It's either or in one case. Here there are multiple possibilities.
Apsara Reddy, how do you view this possibility? 2 judgments, they may concur, they may be the opposite of each other. Clearly, if they are the opposite of each other, that has to be in a sense good news. The danger is if they concur, they may concur in convicting her. 2 judges that don't concur is definitely good news for Sasikala.
I've heard all the possibilities from the legal experts. I can assure you that tomorrow will be a good day for Madam Sasikala, but I also want to hark back to what Mr. Durai Pandian said earlier. Karan, on your previous show, you yourself picked up where one of their spokesperson admitted to a DMK's role. Multiple times you put the same question and they indicated that there's some kind of DMK support. And today, he's indirectly admitting to horse trading. First, they're saying the MLAs are held hostage and they can't communicate. And today, they're saying they're communicating with the MLAs.
All right. I respect your right to be polemical at this particular point and to hit back at your opponent, the DMK, but our discussion tonight is not really about that, so let's come back. Mr. Durai Pandian, how do you view the possibility, not the possibility, now it is definite and confirmed, that there will be 2 judgments tomorrow? And as I said, they may concur, and if they concur, that's one thing, but they may not concur, they may go in opposite directions.
As early as 1991, she was convicted in Color TV scam. Yeah, 1 minute, Karan. And 1991 and the next year, she was convicted in Color TV scam. She has got multiple cases against her. And now this case is not a trial. After a trial, an appeal, and then second time it is coming up before Supreme. It will be a conviction.
Well, how do you know? You've got 2 different judgments. How can you be sure they'll concur rather than go in opposite directions to each other?
Karan, if I say something, it will be hypothetical, Karan. I'm not on that at all. According to few records, what I saw, my opinion is 10% it is going to be conviction. So there will not be any floor test or all these risks. All
right, Mr. Durai Pandian, I'm not sure if that's your opinion as opposed to being your hope. But an opinion has to be based on something that requires reasoning. Hope is simply based upon your passionate belief. I think it's your hope rather than your opinion. Let's take a break. Let's take a break at that point. When I come back, I want to turn to the second and perhaps equally tantalizing question. In the event that the acquittal is upheld, or in the other event that the Supreme Court has 2 conflicting judgments and therefore can't come to a conclusion, what is the next step? Should Sasikala be sworn in on the grounds that she claims she has a majority of the AIA-DMK MPs with her? Or should there be a composite floor test on the grounds that Mr. Paneerselvam claims A, there will be floor cross-voting, and B, he's been in touch with 15 or maybe it was 50 who've assured him that they actually will secretly vote for him. And that's a critical issue that the governor faces, because if he calls her in to form a government and then seek a floor test in her own name, he'd have given her a huge advantage. On the other hand, On the other hand, many people believe the composite floor test that was established in UP 1998 in the Jagdambika Pal Kalyan Singh case was actually a constitutional anomaly and should never be repeated again. We're going to take a break and come back and ask, what should the governor do in the case of acquittal? Welcome back. You're watching To The Point, and we're discussing what's going to happen tomorrow. Soli Sorabji, let me put to you a simple but critical question. In the event that Sasikala's acquittal is upheld, what should the governor do? Should he call upon her to form a government and seek a floor test on the grounds that she claims the vast majority of the MLAs are with her? Or, given that Mr. Paneer Selvam is claiming that actually in their heart of hearts the MLAs are with him, that he's spoken to some 50 or 60 who've made that assurance and several have already crossed over, should the governor go by the Attorney General's advice and take the precedent of the composite floor test used in UP 98? Which of the two would be the correct course of action?
Karan, if it is on the assumption she is acquitted, all right. Then of course the floor test has to be taken to determine whether she has majority. And then one has to go by the result of the floor test. There's no problem there. But the other problem is, since we are discussing it, that suppose the two judges, no difficulty, differ in their conclusions. I don't agree with Sanjay they should go to a three-judge bench. It can go to a three-judge. And he can say whether he agrees with one judge or the other. And that can be one reason for, ending this sort of a stalemate and a peculiar situation with the But to your very specific question, in acquittal, there's no question about it. Floor test, if she proves a majority, that has to be accepted.
What about the suggestion from the Attorney General?
The main question
what about,
here was
sorry
whether
Sorabji, listen to me. Listen to me, Sorabji. What about the suggestion from the Attorney General that in the circumstances a composite floor test might be fairer?
Well, that's a possible thing, though that composite floor test was not a very good precedent, but it can be. If Attorney General, I'm inclined to agree with him, with some reservation.
We've got pictures on the screen of Sasikala sitting there with her MLAs surrounding her. She's speaking to them. I'm not sure what she's speaking about, but I want to put that critical question to you, Sanjay Hegde. In the circumstances that prevail, what would be the right and fair course of action for the governor? If she's acquitted, should she be sworn in and asked to prove her majority, or should the governor opt for the UP 1998 precedent of a composite floor test, which is, by the way, the advice the Attorney General gave him?
The UP case was a one-off because Jagdambika Pal had already been sworn in. So to get over that logjam, it was by a court order that you had both of them as chief minister sitting and as a floor test. That cannot be the case here, because after all you have the anti-defection law. The ANNA-DMK is quite entitled to enforce its whips. There cannot be a composite floor test if she is acquitted. If she is acquitted, I think the best thing that the governor would be advised to do is to swear her in immediately and ask her to prove her majority on the floor of the House by seeking a confidence motion.
Just a moment, can I ask you?
There is no question of both her and Paneer Selvam
in a
yes,
competition.
Please, go on.
Can I ask you this? Are you therefore saying that because the Supreme Court verdict is coming tomorrow and she could be acquitted, the advice given by the Attorney General is overtaken? In other words, his advice would have applied if the judgment was delayed by a week or so. But now that the judgment is tomorrow and she could be acquitted, his advice of a composite floor test is overtaken. Is that your position?
That is my position. If she is acquitted tomorrow, the governor may do well to ask the Attorney General for fresh advice.
Mr. Durai Pandya, let me bring you in. If the governor concurs with both Soli Sorabji as well as Sanjay Hegde, both of whom are saying that if Sasikala's acquittal is upheld, then she must be sworn in and asked to prove her majority on the floor, but there's no question of a composite floor test any longer. If he goes by that advice, this is bad news for
agree.
Mr. Paneer Selvan.
But still, what to do? The legal position is as such. I do agree with that stand. I have certainly no two opinion about it.
So you accept that if she is acquitted, she has
Yes.
not just the first mover advantage,
Yes.
but it's bad news for Mr. Paneer Selvam.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Mr. Durai Pandyan's silence, I shall interpret as a yes, a reluctant, sad yes, but nonetheless a yes. We're going to cut across to Sasikala's press conference taking place there on the left hand of your screen.